After a second round of lawmaker recall votes failed, the ruling and opposition parties regroup to plan their next moves. Premier Zhou Rongtai takes tough questions about how Taiwan is working to lower its U.S. tariff rate of 20%. China's top real estate developer has been removed from the Hong Kong stock market. What does this say about China's broader economy?
Well, if you look at how important real estate is to the Chinese economy in the past, it can be estimated to around 25 to 30%.
Plus, the Defense Ministry seeks to boost support for the armed forces, but personnel won't be getting a pay raise this year. Good evening and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. After a second wave of lawmaker recall votes failed over the weekend, Taiwan's two biggest political parties are deciding what to do next. The ruling DPP, which was aligned with the recall push, is facing a cabinet reshuffle and an internal shakeup. Meanwhile, the opposition Kuomintang, whose lawmakers survived the votes, is eyeing a comeback in the next elections, but with one big obstacle. John Van Trieste reports.
A second round of recall votes to unseat opposition Kuomintang lawmakers failed Saturday. And now, the talk within the ruling Democratic Progressive Party is about who should take responsibility. President Lai Ching-te says Zhou Rongtai can stay on as premier. But some of the cabinet members may go, with a reshuffle possible by the end of the week.
所有正式的内阁人事的调整都是从昨天才开始的，那前面都是在做一些预备的工作而已。所以我不可能今天有确定的人选，希望能够在本周稍晚能够向国人提出一个报告。那么也希望这个新的内阁的组成能够得到国人及国会的支持。
Two leading party lawmakers, Caucus Whip Wu Siyao and Caucus Secretary General Chen Peiyu, are also leaving their roles, though not their seats. The Democratic Progressive Party has now held the presidency for 3 terms in a row, and it's treating the results of Saturday's recall vote as a gauge of public sentiment.
大罢免虽然是公民团体所发起的，但是执政的成效也仍然一定会影响到选民投票的意向。所以呢，民进党必须在未来回应民意的期待。
The Kuomintang won a second victory in a row, with Saturday's attempt to remove its lawmakers failing. And it's buoyed with excitement over the next 2 big elections, the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential race. But despite the momentum, it's having a problem of its own, leveraging a rising star. The person it sees as key to future victories, popular Taichung Mayor Lu Xiaoyan, has turned down the job of party chair. She says she needs to focus on solving her city's economic problems. While some in the party respect her decision, others say getting Lu to change her mind could be essential to keeping the party's recent successes coming. But that could be a tall order. And some analysts believe the sitting party chair, Eric Ju, has tried to discourage Lu, despite appearing to look forward to passing the torch and his own retirement.
However, when you actually watch the interview, really what it was is a coded message to Lu Xiaoyan. And what he talked about is the difficulties of the job. For example, he mentioned that they have over 100 million NT in debt, and he talked about how difficult it was to raise money, and he talked about all the difficulties of running the party. And, reading between the lines, he talked about how it is difficult to organize that many different personalities and to be a punching bag through all of it. Left unsaid were also upcoming legal challenges.
With the recall campaign behind them, both parties are now looking for how to make the best of the outcome. And the coming days could be consequential for what comes next in Taiwan's hyper-partisan politics. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's premier and vice premier faced tough questions in the legislature on Monday as negotiations to lower Washington's 20% tariff on most Taiwanese goods continue. As Chris Gorn reports, they say talks are active, while the opposition has criticized the process.
Taiwan's top cabinet officials faced questions from lawmakers on Monday about ongoing tariff negotiations with the United States and reiterated some of the government's key goals in the talks. First among them is to lower the tariff rate below its current 20%. Second, to fold the as-yet unannounced semiconductor tariffs, known as Section 232, into any overall deal. And third, to avoid having new tariff rates stack on top of old ones, pushing that effective rate even higher. Vice Premier Zheng Lijun, who is leading the negotiation team, said that the talks are active, with the team having had a call with their U.S. counterparts as recently as last Friday. Opposition lawmakers have criticized the process as opaque, and they're raising concerns about Taiwan's tariff rate being higher than neighboring countries.
在野党完全看不懂执政者，今天的谈判如此的失败，日本、韩国、台湾最大的竞争者，都是15%的上限，天花板。
因为他们已经达成协议，
我们20%是地板。
我们还在努力争取更合理的税率。
While Premier Zhuo Rongtai was in the legislature answering questions, President Lai Ching-te was in the presidential office meeting with agricultural experts and touting the government's nearly $600 million relief plan as part of an overall tariff relief package. So as we wait for the Section 232 announcement and an overall trade deal with Washington, expect to see more public officials out trying to reassure the public. Patrick Chun and Chris Gorin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's economy is showing mixed signals. That's according to the latest data from the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research, or TIER. TIER's president says demand for electronics and AI gave exports a short-term boost, but the country will need to prepare for the long-term impact of U.S. tariffs. The Manufacturing Climate Index rose in July, ending 5 straight months of decline, but construction was slowed by typhoons, and housing and services remain weak, leading to growing concerns of a downturn. TSMC has reportedly decided to remove Chinese equipment from its future chip production in light of upcoming U.S. restrictions. Nikkei Asia says TSMC will look for other suppliers to fall in line with a U.S. bill called the Chip Equip Act. This says foreign chip companies that receive U.S. funding and tax credits must not use Chinese chip-making equipment. TSMC is a recipient of U.S. grants and is looking to reduce its reliance on Chinese suppliers as it prepares to open more fabs in the U.S. state of Arizona. Evergrande, once China's largest property developer, delisted from the Hong Kong Stock Exchange on Monday, ending a 16-year run. The company's market value, which once peaked at $51 billion, has now plunged to just about $282 million. Our reporter Ai Chi spoke with Gary Ng from financial firm Natixis for more on this story.
China's property giant Evergrande is delisted from the Hong Kong market on Monday, which is seen as the end of China's real estate bubble. Can you walk us through why this happened as part of the country's property crisis?
I would say that over the past 1 decade, we have seen this massive ballooning size of the China's property market, and a large part of it is really fueled by the leverage by developers and households. So back in August 2020, the Chinese government issued a regulation called the Free Red Line, which basically tried to curb all this leverage behavior that the developers have. So the consequence is that in the next year, many developers, they are not able to get enough liquidity to fund their operation. First, because they are highly leveraged, so they need all this money to repay the debt that it's hard for them to borrow further. Second, it's also a market that's very reliant on pre-sales home, which means that home buyers would pay upfront for their unit before it even completed. And then the confidence has lost, and therefore developers are actually facing all these 2 problems at the same time. Evergrande is a landmark case because it is indeed really the biggest developer in China. It's not being able to survive. It has gone through processes in not being able to issue audit statement. The court has ordered it to liquidate the assets. It's still undergoing a restructuring process that we are not so sure what is the outcome.
How does Evergrande's collapse affect China's broader economy, and where does China stand now?
If you look at how important real estate is to the Chinese economy in the past, it can be estimated to around 25 to 30%, which is indeed a very big part of the economy. So this number doesn't really only include the direct home sales on the construction activities, but it's really the broad impact that when there is a unit being completed and when household buy all this unit, there will be other related expenses, consumption, investment, etc. So what we see so far is that we haven't really seen a very sharp rebound in home sales so far. There has been many policies being rolled out, but the effectiveness hasn't been that strong because households remain rather not so confident in the future anticipation of the home prices. So therefore, they're not really buying.
How is China moving on from the property crisis? Is it on a positive or negative trajectory in the long run? And in terms of finding new sources of growth?
I would say that there has been many policies being rolled out trying to divert the pressure from real estate and trying to offset it with other development with different sectors. Indeed, we have seen some new growth sector in maybe example is electric vehicles. China has been also quite good in producing all this green technology such as solar panels and wind turbines. And there is also a gradual shift towards all this internet platform, digitalization, and all this kind of tech-related sectors. But the problem is that when you look at the sum of all these sectors, it's really quite hard to argue that it can really offset such a large part of the economy, which is almost a quarter of it. So I think this is why the likely outcome is that we will continue to see the deceleration on the macro growth being dragged by what we see in the real estate sector. All these other tech-related sectors may provide some buffer, but this is just not big enough to really help on the macro picture, and it can really stabilize it.
That was Gary Young from Texas. A referendum on whether to restart the Ma An nuclear power plant failed over the weekend, meaning the plant will stay offline. But as Irene Lin reports, existing nuclear waste is still an ongoing issue.
Voters in Taiwan have decided not to bring back nuclear power in a nationwide referendum, with the yes votes failing to meet the threshold to pass. Still, the number of votes cast in favor was almost triple the number of votes against, indicating strong public support for the energy source. Now, with President Lai Ching-te saying he will not rule out the possibility of a nuclear comeback in a response to the referendum result, and the legislature passing an amendment to allow a 20-year extension on nuclear power plant licenses this May, some practical problems are back in the spotlight.
他要是说延役20年，他第一件事情必须要把他的燃料池清出来，清出来要马上要摆在外面的干储嘛，然后他还有一个核能的一个隔绝的就避邻措施的一个空间。 所以他至少要买现在所需求好几倍大的土地。
For the past decades, the highly radioactive spent fuel rods have been stored in these pools inside the plants, while low-level radioactive waste, such as contaminated construction materials, have been stored in the plants and on the outlying Orchid Island. Taiwan's state-run power company Taipower has a plan to build more dry storage facilities on site, as the current ones reach capacity. One pro-nuclear environmental group says the issue could be easily resolved.
我们全台所有的高阶核废料，之前有人评估大概花7公顷的土地就可以做。我们全部4个电厂的占地大概是1100公顷，就算是11公顷，你也只要花1%的厂区的土地来做规划就可以了，技术上不是问题啊。
But the anti-nuclear camp says it's not just about space. There are also maintenance problems. Dry storage facilities last 4 or 5 decades, after which they run the risk of radiation leaks.
因为其实我们现有的钢筋水泥，其实它能够撑的安全年限也差不多就是40-50年，它就会开始产生裂缝。所以其实到40-50年之后呢，干式储能它就可能需要换桶，然后它的外表的钢筋水泥的这些建筑物可能也都需要重修。所以其实当你干式储存，你每换一次桶的时候，就是增加辐射外泄的风险。所以那换桶的次数其实是越少越好。
However, dry storage is only a temporary solution. and there are no laws to decide where to dispose of the spent fuel permanently. As discussions around Taiwan's nuclear energy policy continue, waste management will continue to be a big issue, likely for generations to come. Hank Xu and Irene Lin for TaiwanPlus.
And coming up after the break, digital security watchers here in Taiwan say Chinese-owned social media app TikTok weakens children's learning and poses national security risks.
Thank you for sharing our passion for food and Taiwan. Veggie Island explores the vibrant world of plant-based cuisine.
Wow, this is amazing.
While Taiwan on the Rocks uncovers the stories and craftsmanship behind every sip.
Have you ever tried Taiwanese beer?
Are you ready to taste even more of Taiwan?
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The Defense Ministry held a military carnival in Taipei on Sunday to showcase the armed forces. But controversy is brewing after the Premier's announcement last week that the government's budget for next year will not include more money for military pay. Ellen Liu has more.
Under the blazing sun, Air Force Academy cadets came out in force in Taipei's Xinyi district, showcasing their musical talents. It's a campaign to get the public more acquainted with the military. Taiwan's Marines, also there, with a mini version of their grueling Road to Heaven obstacle course. This is the Defense Ministry's Military Carnival, held to celebrate Armed Forces Day on September 3rd.
可能还蛮有距离的，对，但是就是小朋友或者是任何年龄，好像都可以就是更多认识，
让我们的国军走入社会，让我们的国防走入我们的日常生活。
But this comes after Premier Zhuo Rongtai announced last Thursday that next year's budget won't include pay raises for service members. That's despite promises of around $1,000 per month for volunteer soldiers, a bill opposition parties pushed through the legislature in June. Zhuo says those payments can only be made once the Constitutional Court decides it doesn't violate the Constitution, comments that raise concern among both ruling and opposition parties.
就算是今天要实现，也必须要依法先编列预算，先行发放。财划法是这样子的，那为什么军人的待遇就必须要受到不同的差别对待呢？
第一线的募兵官其实受到非常的，就是很错愕。那我觉得就是说，正面在处理这一个事情的角度上，并没有做出很明确的沟通。那我觉得就是现在对于整个部队的士气，其实有蛮大的负面的影响。
Analysts say raising compensation for military personnel is reasonable, as long as it accounts for the country's economic means.
军人的待遇提高是有它的正当性跟必要性，因为 uniform man 这些军人其实一个很特殊的群体，他们是武装的公务员，那进入了职场，第一个他会牺牲部分的自由，那第二个就是他的工作的相对风险比较高。
The cabinet's defense budget proposal is more than $30 billion for 2026, slightly exceeding 3% of GDP, the highest increase since 2008. But now, lawmakers are waiting for the final budget approval, and they'll be closely watching how pay raises for service members are factored in. Ryan Wu and Ellen Liu for TaiwanPlus.
A senior officer with Taiwan's Coast Guard has been indicted for corruption after allegedly leaking sensitive patrol information. Prosecutors say the official, surnamed Zhuang, leaked information to illegal operators on both sides of Taiwan Strait in exchange for nearly $60,000. He was dismissed from his post and placed in detention earlier this year. He is accused of providing screenshots of the Coast Guard's radar system and patrol movements to people engaged in illegal cross-border activity. Taiwan's government watchdog organization recently said that TikTok harms children's learning and poses a serious national security risk. It cited concerns over user data stored in China, as well as the app's role in spreading disinformation here in Taiwan. The report urged the cabinet to address the issue. To find out how Taiwan can better regulate TikTok, Alan Liu spoke to Huang Kai-sun from the Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technology, or DSET.
The Control Yuan reports that TikTok is having a negative impact on children's learning and posing threats to their health. In your observation, is this a serious problem in Taiwan?
Because TikTok design is rather optimized for engagement, not for well-being, which means they use short, fast-paced video to keep kids hooked, but often at the cost of attention span and exposure to risky content. So I think in Taiwan especially, these risks are amplified because the youth adoption is much higher than other countries. And to be more specific, I think in terms of regulations, we should focus on three things really. First of all, to set enforceable age and privacy standards for minors. And second, to give independent researchers access to platform data so we can actually measure them, measure the harm especially. And third, to build school-based digital literacy and much stronger parental controls.
TikTok not only collects personal data from Taiwanese users, but it also serves as a tool for China's information warfare. How high do you think its national security risk is?
TikTok does pose a rather credible national security risk for Taiwan because it couples massive behavioral data collection with rather opaque algorithmic control by basically a company ultimately tied to a jurisdiction that regards Taiwan as a strategic target. And I think this is a very structural problem. And I think in more practical terms, that risk has two channels. First of all, I think informationally speaking, target recommendation systems can amplify narratives which are favorable to China. And this may demobilize or polarize Taiwan's audiences during the crisis. And second, technically speaking, I think data about devices signals and social networks can be useful in inference or exploitation operations.
Compared to the US and the EU, Taiwan's approach to regulating TikTok seems more lenient. What is the main reason for this?
Taiwan's reluctant position results from three interacting factors. First of all, democratic norms and a strong cultural commitment to free expression make policymakers very wary of sweeping platform bans that could basically be framed as censorship. So that's the first reason. And second, I think the domestic political calculus is too delicate. So measures that restrict popular consumer apps risk public backlash, especially among younger voters. And I think the third reason is that institutional capacity and Taiwan's legal pathway are quite different from the US and the European Union. I think basically the US took a hardline approach. Either TikTok had to sell or face a ban. And basically that was backed by new laws and court battles. The EU went a rather different route. It relies on its Digital Services Act to push for transparency instead of kicking the platform out. And I think in Taiwan, as we have seen in the 2019 restriction on government devices, I think the current approach so far has been rather narrowly targeted cybersecurity measures rather than a much more comprehensive interdictions.
That was Huang Kai-sun from DSET. Taiwan has triumphed in the Little League World Series Championship with a 7-0 victory over the U.S. state of Nevada. This is the first title for Taiwan since 1996, ending a 29-year drought. 12-year-old pitcher Lin Jingze dominated the early game, retiring the first 13 batters and allowing just one hit across 5 innings. The team went undefeated in all 5 of its games during the annual tournament in South Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Taiwan now has 18 World Series titles, the most of any country aside from the U.S. As Taiwan becomes a super-aged society, people are finding ways to keep the growing number of older people engaged after retirement. IHE looks at one business in southern Taiwan, bridging the gap between old and young local residents.
Retiree Su Huang Chougui works as the manager of this unique shop in Tainan in southern Taiwan, showcasing her cooking skills in every dish she prepares for customers from the local community. She says she enjoys working at the shop, which brings together people from both older and younger generations.
我觉得他这个观念很好，让那个我们这些年纪大的有一个活动的地方、工作的地方。
The business model behind the shop seeks to offer solutions to Taiwan's aging society, building connections between young and old, enabling them to grow businesses in ways that foster harmony within their communities. Founder Lu Zhibang says the road to success wasn't easy, but was worth it in the end.
之前用社造的角度去推，反而很难。可是用这种同才的关系或伙伴的关系去互相影响，反而是在这当中去得到的一个很棒的收获吧。
The collaboration covers a range of activities, not just food, from weaving classes to musical performances. With less focus on profit, people are able to explore how they want to spend their time, and the founders say the benefits are mutual.
很多人都会觉得说，我们在帮长辈圆梦，其实长辈也在帮我们圆梦，让大家一起去寻找一个高龄化社会之后，我们想要的一个好的在地的社区生活是怎么样。
As Taiwan's population rapidly ages, its self-adhered economy is projected to exceed $100 billion in 2025. Initiatives like this one are emerging to keep seniors active and engaged. Howard Chan, NIT for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. And before we go, check out hundreds of corgis competing in the annual corgi race in Lithuania. I'm Eric Gao. Take care. We'll see you next time.